Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
Dean, we've talked a lot over the last year about all these interesting technologies like IoT, AI, cloud. A lot of nebulous concepts, no pun intended on the cloud side there. And sometimes I think also that we stop and go, well, where is all this stuff?
Right?
We talk about a lot of it.
Keep talking about it.
But where is it really?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it really out there? Is it really making an impact? Is something really happening?
Is it just an oasis that we keep referencing and we keep moving forward?
Is it just a bunch of marketing buzzwords that somebody made up or something? Well,
I don't know.
We're going to kind of get into that today.
Okay.
We have Brian Lampright from Code with us today. We're going to be talking a little bit about the state of digital transformation, understanding it, and also little tips on maybe how to sell into this digital transformation world.
Yes, sir.
We're going to explain the current state, where things are now, what technologies have and have not really taken off, maybe how the pandemic changed some things a bit. You know, there's
a little bit.
Some of that technology probably is a little more important now than it ever was before.
100%.
We're going to talk about where maybe some of our VAR friends' focus should be, what they should be thinking about, what they should be talking about to their customers.
Yep.
Give you some practical applications in maybe a few different industries. And as always, our value to the VAR.
We're going to stuff all that into this podcast?
We are, all of it.
That's a lot.
Well, I mean, that's why we brought in Brian.
Yeah, so we need some help.
So we don't ramble on about stuff we really don't know what we're talking about.
Help. Yeah, we definitely need help.
So, all right, well, it's time for us to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right, as I mentioned, our guest today, Brian Lampright. He is the Senior Product Manager of Software for the Code Corporation. Brian, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do day to day at Code.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I've been in software my entire career. It's funny, when I was in high school, the internet didn't really exist, and then college, we started using it, and my whole career has been around building stuff on the internet, and to see where it's come, 20 years later is pretty amazing. At Code, I manage all of our software. So obviously we have a decoder that runs inside of our hardware scanners, and we also sell SDKs, and you can embed those SDKs into any type of software project that you may have where you need to scan products. So we have a lot of software going on, and software is growing like mad in this industry, and keeps us really busy.
Yeah, we need a software guy tapped into it to help us navigate this, because it's like the Wild West. And by the way, he happens to be out of Utah, so it's like, wasn't that the Wild West at one point? Anyway,
wow, that was a stretch.
That's a little bit of a stretch. Okay, anyway.
But yes, well, and it's funny because when we initially were talking about bringing you on the show, we were kind of talking about what our topic was going to be. You mentioned that you kind of dabble a lot in a lot of these digital transformations and edge technologies and the stuff that is, maybe before now kind of been talked about as like, hey, this is this broad, great future that we're coming up to. But, some of that future is happening now. Some of it is closer to reality than we thought before. Some of it's actually in practical use. So, let's start that off then. When we talk about this idea of digital transformation, which I know is kind of a broad term, but that's where we start slotting in stuff like IoT, machine vision, AI, cloud, analytics. So from your point of view, where are we in this digital transformation world? What's if there's any kind of timeline that even exists, or any kind of process from start to finish of how this is supposed to go, where are we at right now, and what's happening in the moment?
I feel like we're kind of in a middle ground. When you talk about things like machine vision, barcoding was one of the very first machine vision applications that happened. So it's been around quite a long time. But now that we have the power of the cloud and the massive data sets that are available there, and the computing power, and we can finally use artificial intelligence combined with those technologies for everyday life. And now we're just now starting to figure out how to use things like AI and the cloud and really leverage them to make big impacts. So I feel like we're kind of somewhere in the middle of that journey.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, when you think about it, right, there's all this promise around some of these technologies, and we understand the old way of doing business, but how do we transform into some of these new areas of business, and how do we start moving the ball down that field meaningfully, in that kind of a way? And so, when I was thinking about it, and you read some of the articles around digital transformation, they talk a lot about customer experience. Maybe having an eye on customer experience and how that can transform your business, and how you need to move into digital domains in order to make that more efficient. There's operational agility, which we play in a lot. And when I say we, I mean collectively we, like code. And I mean we're back of house. We're doing barcode scanning and stuff like that. So it's how do we make the operation more agile in a digital transformation. But another thing that I was reading about, and maybe we can tap into this a little bit, was the cultural and leadership need to embrace digital transformation as well. We were talking a little bit on the last podcast. There seems to be a barrier sometimes when you're trying to embrace new digital transformation, whatever it is, workflow. There's just a barrier. You reach people that are just, they don't want to go there. They don't want to get into a digital, but there's so much of a need to get into that space, because one of the things the pandemic has taught us, if you ask me, is, we're expediting the use of digital technology to a lot of good right now. Yep. I mean, how else would we be getting the vaccine out so fast and all those things, right?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting you mentioned that. I was thinking the same thing. Our last podcast about warehouses and trying to get them to move into the new world of technology, and why so many have been reticent to do so. I think you could say that across a lot of different industries. There's some industries that are more well suited to that kind of move fast and try new stuff, but there's some where it gets harder than ever. They might very well look at this, and you kind of used to refer to it several times in the last year when we would kind of talk about technology related to the pandemic. You used to mention several times on last year's episodes this idea of, hey, we had a chalkboard, or we had a a design board up of, here are these ideas that we think are important, that we know is going to be the future of our business in some way or another, and how are we going to get there? And suddenly some of those ideas became, no, we got to do this now. We can't wait anymore. We can't, like in healthcare, for instance, we can't wait on telehealth. We have to do it now. It's important because it's a pandemic. It's something we got to address right now. So, Brian, I kind of want maybe you to touch on that a little bit, of this idea of, how the pandemic kind of changed the conversation. Where are you seeing places, what kind of technology and transformation are you seeing that people are going, I don't know if we know we need to get there, but we just don't know how yet, or we don't know if we're ready for it. What changed over the past year that really made an impact?
Yeah, we could probably talk for a full hour on just this one subject. What happened over the past year has been a complete game changer. It's turned industries upside down. It's completely changed our human habits and the ways we shop and we get food and we use telehealth with our doctors. So much has changed, and for technology people like myself, that's an opportunity, because you mentioned barriers. We often run into barriers where people get used to doing things a certain way, and they develop patterns and they get comfortable with those patterns, and then it becomes a barrier to advance to maybe the next level of where you might want to take things technology wise. But due to COVID and how that's turned our world upside down, these barriers have been torn down, and there's ripe opportunity to really change the game and do things very differently from now on.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, when you think about it, and sometimes it's small incremental steps. We've talked in the past, I don't know if you remember, John, we were talking a little bit about RPAs, or robotic process automation. These are small steps towards digitizing a workflow that I think are really becoming much more prevalent in today's environment, where we don't have time. We just don't have the kind of time in order to morph our business like we may have had in the past. And certainly that's part of what the pandemic has taught us. But when you look at supply chains that we live in, right, Brian? I mean, we're in supply chains. Our customers are in supply chains. There's a need for a digital transformation to happen there that is just urgent. I mean, when you're operating on paper and Excel, like we were talking about the other day, dude, you are on an island. You need to get in the cloud.
Right.
You need to, you need to embrace these things. And so I know that a lot of times resellers get flummoxed by that because they understand the need to move that, but moving their customers to that direction sometimes is a hard thing to do. And, but maybe it's little incremental steps like an RPA or something like that, where you're just digitizing a form. Let's just start off with this form, for crying out loud, right? And we're gonna digitize that, and we're gonna automate the process of getting that into your ERP. Just little steps like that to move companies towards that. But Brian, talk to us a little bit more about AI and your thoughts on, since you live in software and you're hearing about the uses of AI. To me, that's another one of these really foggy clouds. AI. Everybody talks about, AI. AI is going to, you got Elon Musk saying, beware of AI, right? Because it's going to rule the world. And then we got AI chatbots out there. They're really kind of helpful.
Right.
So anyway, what are your thoughts on AI and how is it touching what you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, there's a diverse range of AI, and AI has honestly been around for quite a long time. But the thing that was missing is the power, the computing power to make it applicable, and for the average person to use it. And now we have Siri and Alexa and all those that are AI powered, and they're amazing, and we all use it. But where I see other impacts with AI is doing other things, like we're in the barcoding industry, and a practical application of something like AI would be automating the settings of a piece of hardware or a device based on the types of imagery that's coming through. So running a bunch of imagery through to basically train an AI model, and then optimizing those settings to have the fastest scans you could possibly have. You mentioned warehousing. Things are zipping by on a conveyor belt, and you need to scan very fast. So there's so many different ways to use AI, and it's definitely the next frontier, and we're kind of just diving into the waters there.
And I wonder, as we get deeper and deeper into this, if it creates a divide, right? You've got companies that are embracing the digital transformation, and they're going down a path. And those that are lagging behind, not going down that path, right? So it's going to create like this divide between the haves maybe of digital and the haves not, that have decided not to go down that route. Because I think about the multiplying effect that AI, machine vision, these types of things. I mean, I've seen the use cases where, just to your point, Brian, you're training a machine to all these millions of images so it can make smarter decisions, make the whole workflow a lot smarter. Dude, that's going to be a lot faster than whatever is not using that, not using digital transformation in some side. So really fascinating stuff.
And I think there's go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say that, and you think about the application on the medical side, and it's really exciting. We hear every day about how they're using AI to study all this medical data and make correlations. And John, you mentioned telehealth earlier. That's something that has advanced by years in the past year. I recently had a conversation with the biggest healthcare provider in Utah, and we specifically spoke about telehealth and where that's going and how COVID affected it. And they said that it advanced their technology and their roadmaps and their progression by multiple years by what we experienced in COVID. And you think about how IoT could play into that. You now have people at home, doing a video call like this with their doctor. IoT comes into play because now you can put these IoT devices in the home to monitor blood pressures and glucose and all these other things. All of it feeds up to the cloud, and you use AI to put all of these pieces together and figure out what outcomes need to happen for the doctor. So there's so many applicable uses for AI and IoT in the cloud, and bringing it all together. And that's why I say I feel like we're kind of in the middle, just figuring out how to put it all together.
Let's go a little farther into the cloud there, Brian, because there's yet again another technology that we've been talking about for at least a decade, if not a little bit longer, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can remember when we did a VARTech and we had fog out on the stage. This was like 10 years ago. The
Did you
cloud,
really?
the
Like,
cloud is coming. Yes, it's like
Oh.
everything's going into the cloud. So we've been talking about it for like a
Right.
decade. But on the street, Brian, I mean, what are some of your thoughts around that, or how is code reacting to it? What do you see are some best practices, or just what are your feelings on the cloud and where we're at with the cloud, and should resellers start going all in on it? What are just some of your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's code's been around for a long time, since the 90s. And in some ways we're a little bit old school. We don't leverage the cloud as much as we should, but just like most other industries, we are moving to the cloud, and it's one of those technologies where if you're not using it today, you probably should be. There's just so many advantages, cost and scalability, and the choices between all the different providers, and easily being able to move between the providers. Being able to do things in minutes that would take months to set up a data center. There's just an immense amount of opportunity and reasons to shift to the cloud. So it is one of those technologies where it has been around, a buzzword for almost 10 years now. And if you aren't there, you probably should at least have a plan to get there.
Yeah, I like what you touched on there. If you were adverse to the cloud, or wasn't really, thinking it's still this big monster out there, I think he hit the nail on the head on a couple points there, and that it's kind of mature already, right? You've got providers out there. It's not as scary. The providers out there, you can hop between them if you need to, even though that might be, a little less frequent. There are application developers around it. I mean, it's the world. It's the way that programmers are thinking and talking and developing solutions are around, at least a portion of it are around the cloud. So you got to get it. I guess you got to put your head in the cloud. Is that, can I go there? Can I say that? No.
You already talked about clouds on a stage,
right?
Nebulous
Anyway.
concepts. Yeah. So.
But it is important, I think, at the end of the road, it's important for resellers to understand the value proposition that comes out of the cloud. Because I'll just restate it. All of this is being developed around it. So you're going to be behind. You're going to be on the wrong side of the digital gap that's being implemented if you're not involved in it.
There's also, I think, a story. Sorry, Brian. I was going to say there's also, I think, a story here too about the necessity of doing these things. And Brian, you mentioned earlier that you talked about how telehealth increased so dramatically over the last year. It shouldn't take something like a pandemic to get us to move in these directions. Telehealth should have already been a thing, a prevalent and widespread thing long before now, but everyone drug their feet on it for so long. We're like, no, we're fine. It's people can come in and visit their doctor. No, we should have been doing this a long time. There was no reason not to, but we had to have a pandemic make that happen. I think that's an important, thing to think about when you are going out and talking to your customers and helping them understand, hey, there's going to be a point where this is going to be a necessity. Do you want to be catching up when it's a necessity, or do you want to already be there and have your customers already there and already ready to go because you've been thinking about this and ready to implement this at the right time?
Or worse yet, they can't catch up. They're so far out of the game. The game has advanced beyond catch up.
Yeah, exactly.
Because to me, that's the sense of what I get out of the marketplace. And I think you're dead on with I think telehealth is a really good example of, holy moly, we can do this. Some things can be implemented. So if that's happening there, it's happening other places, right? So industry and stuff continues to advance. Man, if you're not on it, oosh. What were you going to say, Brian? I'm sorry.
Yeah. You made me go to another great example of, trying to play catch up. And when you look at the retail, retail was so disrupted by this past year, and so many went out of business, and now retail is just starting to come back, and they're thinking differently now. In Apple stores, for example, you've been able to bring your own device in there and shop with your own iPhone and never talk to a single employee in the App Store, and purchase your items and walk out the store for years. We're seeing a lot of interest and a lot of development, and a big movement now post-COVID to move that direction for other retailers, where they're really thinking of a bring your own device model into my store. And no more touching the credit card keypad that 100 other people just touched. Really rethinking the retail shopping experience, and And that's going to be a big change coming, post COVID. Is you are going to see retailers change how shopping happens.
So, Brian, let's kind of pivot that conversation a little bit too into, kind of something topical for our VARs here, and thinking about the focus on, how do we talk about these things? How do we bring up these conversations? How do we approach our retailers and tell them how to avoid the next potential catastrophe because they're not ready for something that they could have already been ready for and should have already been ready for? That you don't have to be Apple to be ready for new innovations and to introduce new innovations into your space. So, how do we think about that? Like, Dean, you mentioned earlier this idea of improving customer experiences. That's one great touch point, I think. And it lends itself to the idea of, I feel like many times in our personal world, even though we often think of cool new innovations and technology as happening somewhere else and then eventually coming into our lives, but there are sometimes, I think, with some of these kind of, digital transformation type technologies where we experiencing them as consumers or as people before we actually see them in everyday business practice. AI, for example, I feel like we're all kind of, Siri, we integrate with, voice assistants. We're used to IoT devices in our own homes now, where your intermeshed security systems and home systems, whatever, that are all speaking to each other. Yeah, cloud computing. We all have access to cloud. I store photos in the cloud. You can store documents in the cloud. I feel like we're used to a lot of this stuff personally, but we're not. But for some reason, we're not seeing it happening on the business scale the way it should be. So, Brian, from your perspective, what do those conversations look like if our VARs are going out there and saying, "Hey, there's things that you could be doing where you could be implementing some of these technologies. Maybe you don't go all wild yet and try to reinvent your entire business, but where should they be thinking about getting into this stuff?"
Yeah, I think it comes down to a couple of things you already mentioned is optimizing the customer experience. When we build software, you'll often hear customer first. That's a big thing in software, and we're always thinking customer first. And really that mentality should be in everything that we do is how do we do things the best way for the customer? And even if that means it's harder on the back end to do something, it doesn't matter. It's worth the work. It's worth the effort. So, so in my opinion, going in customer first is the right mentality, and then keeping an open mind, because like we've talked over the past few minutes, COVID has really changed our world, and we are going to see different ways of doing things, different patterns, new technologies that have advanced by years in such a short time. So really keeping an open mind about coming up with new solutions that might be a little different than we proposed in the past.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think part of the conversation, John, is to hit them with a little bit of statistics. Hit them with some stats. So I got a couple for you here.
Oh, awesome.
87% of companies think digital will disrupt their industry. So 9 out of 10 already know of your
Should
customers.
be 10 out of 10, frankly. But
Okay. Well, right. There's always 10%. But anyway, 9 out of 10 already think that digital will disrupt their industry, but only 44% are prepared for the potential of what it's going to do to their industry. So what's that painting a picture? Everybody knows it. Only certain people think that they're even ready for it. And then finally, only 21% of companies believe they've completed their digital transformation. Okay, we've transformed our business, whatever, from operations on. So that means 80% of companies out there still are in need of some sort of digital transformation along the way. So there's opportunity out there, and knowing that is helpful. You can use that knowledge to say, hey, look, we know that you're probably not where you want to be, but we can help get you there. We talk about it a lot, the tech stack that our resellers should be getting, so that they go in with solutions and they have answers, or at least the ability to get some of those answers. I mean, your customers are thinking about it. 9 out of 10 of them are thinking about, how do I transform all this business? It's incumbent upon you, the solution reseller, to walk in there and have some answers mapped out. Yes, if you come up with one that's around customer experience, maybe an easier putt, because everybody's sensitive to that. Everybody understands that. Operational, which is a little bit more in the wheelhouse of our resellers, they understand operations, how to make operations more efficient, workflows more efficient. That's cool too. Another one that I'll throw out there is another buzzword that seems to be coming out of this pandemic is workforce and enablement, right? Think about the wild transformation that happened in March of last year, where literally I hope I'm not overstating it, but it was like 100 million people, tens of millions of people went from an in-office
100
environment
million probably sounds right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
to working at home. I mean, so how do you enable that workforce and all the technology that was needed to make that happen?
Yep.
But that was just to get the basics done. Now we're in a place anyway. It's going to continue to transform itself for the
Very much so.
Yeah.
You know, one that I thought about that it popped into my head as we were talking is around analytics. And I know we're always referring back to healthcare, but I feel like healthcare is always like the interesting frontier for a lot of these technologies. Well, I remember doing some research last year for an ebook that I was reading up on, like the idea of analytics and predictive analytics in healthcare. And it mentioned that a significant, like, I don't remember the percentages off the top of my head, but it mentioned that a lot of hospitals understood that they needed to have analytics as part of their game plan. So plenty of them were adopting it and bringing it in, like, yes, we're going to open up this big world of analytics and gather all this data and have all this information. But the statistics showed that within a year's time, they had abandoned all of it. Either they were just sitting on it, didn't know what to do with it, or they just stopped collecting it altogether because they had no functional plan for what to do with that. And I think that speaks to this larger picture of, again, we understand that we need to do this. We know that digital transformation is important, but we don't know what to do with it when we get there or when we implement something.
Yeah.
And I think that can be something that our VAR partners, that our vendor partners like code, software partners can all kind of work together to help go into a customer and say, hey, we're not telling you just to do this just because it's the thing, it's the buzzword, you know. We're telling you to do this because there's a practical reason, an application that's going to be important to you, to your customers, to your business. Let us explain and show you how that's going to work. And maybe it means you start small with something simple that just, you know, gets the job done. Like you said, maybe it's the customer experience and, hey, we're going to do this. Your customer satisfaction scores are going to increase.
Right.
Maybe, again, looking back at that healthcare side of things, maybe it is using predictive analytics to get people scheduled for their, you know, recurring appointments a little bit faster, get them in the door a little bit sooner so that you don't have to worry about, you know, unexpected illnesses down the road that could have been maybe, you know, averted had someone come in for a routine checkup or something. Maybe that'll give you a nice feel-good story for your patients where you find something ahead of time and help them out before something gets worse. Little stuff like that, I think, can start building up over time to a bigger picture where then suddenly your entire business is built off of these new technologies.
Yeah, but you know what? You're bringing up a really good point in the sense that, you know, in this use case that you have, you've got this mound of data, and how do people navigate through that? That's just like one aspect of it. Hey, Brian, when you're talking to resellers, what are some of the things that you're hearing from resellers about that they're confronting in the marketplace that are barriers to transformation? You know, the digital transformation out there. I mean, just what are you hearing on the street, and maybe how do you guys react to it, or your company or you personally help coach them?
I mean, we see it from all angles, and, you know, maybe something super simple with like a really outdated Windows CE device that's still being sold and used because there's this one little application that vendors find, or end users find useful, and there's no good alternative yet on Android or iPhone to do that. So, I mean, those are kind of easier ones.
To me, it's difficult for resellers when they're put in that position, which is why we continue to preach the tech stack around here. Right. I mean, they're kind of, you know, they're involved in this. To your point, I think you painted a good picture, John, that, hey, we're involved in this and the analytics and the data that we're producing. But then what do you do with that? We've talked about how you really need to tap into an ecosystem that can help you along the way. When you can tap into folks like Brian that have not only is he involved in software for code, but also connecting the dots with other solutions so that you can go to the table with that. And I'm telling you, that is so critical moving forward. I know we preach it a lot here, but you got to be a solution reseller moving forward. You got to know these things and have the answers when you walk in the door, because if you don't, somebody else is going to walk in the door right behind you with the answer.
Very much so. And Brian, to that point, you know, and feel free to throw it if you remember what else you were going to mention here, but are there any particular practical applications that you can think of that have popped up in various industries where, you know, someone has implemented one of these, you know, exciting new interesting technologies and cutting edge innovations, and it has made a difference in their business, where you like, kind of an example maybe we could give to some of our VARs of saying, hey, here's something someone else has done that's made an impact. You know, someone was working with someone in supply chain and recognized, hey, here's a problem that can be solved with cloud. Here's a problem in public sector that can be solved with machine vision. Any examples you've got like that could be useful for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, this one's a little bit future and out there, but
Oh, we
we're
like that.
seeing we're seeing drones. You talk about warehousing and distribution and things like that, where you've got thousands or tens of thousands of items inside of a warehouse, and they all have barcodes. And how do you effectively go through 10,000s of square feet and figure out what's in there? And we've seen robotics in the industry for a while, and now drones are popping up, and so it's just one of those examples of drones started out as like a video hobby thing, but now they have real live applications to where flight plans are built around a warehouse, and the video live streams to a server, and then that server is using machine vision to analyze all the video that's coming in from those drones and do things like barcode scanning, but also recognition of what might be on that pallet based on sizes and things like that. So it's one of those IoT / cloud plays that is quickly developing a lot of steam behind it.
That's awesome. I never would have thought about a drone zipping around inside of a warehouse. I mean, it makes total sense when you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, to your point, because we've talked about like AMRs, those robots moving around and shuffling stuff from here to there. But yeah, it never occurred to me. Yeah, a drone could be flying around and doing a lot of that work too. And getting up into the upper stacks, giving you a nice clear picture of everything. That's pretty cool.
Analyzing everything, the workflow of the people that are working, the products. I mean, it really, I guess it does have a bird's eye view. God, stop me.
Man, the puns are coming
terrible
fast and
today.
furious for
I'm
you
going to
today.
stop. I promise. I'm done.
Brian, anything else?
The thing I wanted to mention earlier, as you were kind of talking through, you almost said the word, but not quite. And another big reason that cloud is so popular and so powerful is really standardization. When it comes to the cloud, for the most part, we're all talking the same language. There's a lot of different computer languages, but we all understand it. We're all working together using things like APIs and JSON and containerization of code. And because there's these key standardization practices happening on the internet in the cloud, it makes it an incredibly powerful way to build things, and not just build a solution I'm building, but connect it to other solutions to make it infinitely more powerful.
Yeah.
I love that.
What are some of the questions that resellers come to you with or on that front? Because I know you guys got a lot of great software and you're involved in sometimes the integration of that into existing ERPs or stuff like that. What are some of the common things that you run into that maybe we can help people understand or get them down in the field a little bit more as it relates? What are they coming to you? What kind of questions are they coming to you with, Brian?
A lot of the time it's compatibility. Like they might look on a website and see that, we offer support for these languages or these platforms or iOS or Android or whatever it may be. And their maybe kind of niche system that they're building doesn't match exactly what's being talked about. But the interesting thing is it's typically not hard to adapt a piece of code to work with another technology that might not be listed on a data sheet or something. So reaching out and having conversations and asking questions and chasing that can often lead to a good outcome to where we don't list that support for that on the website, but by doing this and that, it's not a difficult project to get there.
Bingo. I mean, we talk about it all the time about how vendors obviously support their product. And if you don't have a good relationship with the vendor and or the software people behind the scenes, they can help you. They can help you enable these types of solutions if you have the conversation with them. And sometimes, thank you for bringing that up, Brian, it might not be on the data sheet. It might not show in the official documentation that we can help support this. But if you have a call with them, I guarantee you they've got some resources that they might be able to put behind it and help you develop some of those solutions. solutions some of them might be a little outlandish too. I mean, I don't know if you have any great story of an outlandish solution that you had to develop, because I know sometimes it gets a little boring. Maybe can I parse the licenses of my barcode or something like that, and maybe it's not as sexy as other things, but anyway, the information's there, the connection's there. When you have a good vendor relationship, a lot can happen.
Very much so. And I think it just goes back to what we always talk about with our VARs and the idea of being a good salesperson, being a good solution seller is, helping someone realize like, hey, I'm going to get you through all of this. This isn't just, I'm going to sell you on the practicality of the cloud and then say good luck and go wandering off while you try to sort it out. Or back to that analytics thing I mentioned earlier, the hospitals. Like there was a failure on the part of whoever it was that introduced them to that analytics package and that whatever it is that they were using in order to start gathering that data, that they didn't stick with them to help them understand what to do with it. Because there's no reason someone should abandon something like that if someone's not there helping them figure out what to do with it. So that can be your job. And if you don't know how to do it yourself, that's fine. That's when you bring in a partner like Code. That's when you bring in your friends at BlueStar. It's when you bring in your software partners, and we will help you, put together that kind of solution package so that they can feel confident that they're going to get support all the way through, and that this isn't just going to be some frontier like new technology that they're going to run out there into and suddenly look around one day and go,
there's nobody around. What the hell happened? Where am I?
They're not out literally in the Wild West getting into gunfights every day, trying to figure out how to
leave that to Brian in Utah.
I can make some bad puns too. So.
There you go. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Brian, thank you so much for this conversation. It was definitely a good one. Before we shift over to our recurring segments, I want to, as always, thank our sponsors and thanks so much to Code, who is sponsoring us this quarter, and that's why we've got Brian on here today. We appreciate your support of our show. As always, hey, if you want to reach out to us, you want to tell us a little bit about your thoughts on our show or on some of the topics we discussed, a few things you can do. One, go to Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating. Leave a review for us. We'd be happy to read some of those on the air. If you give us a 1-star review, no, I'm not going to read it on air. Sorry. Maybe I will, and I'll shame you. But we prefer the 5 stars.
We're not beneath that. Yes,
exactly.
we can do that. Yeah.
If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, and hey, more importantly, tell someone about this show. If you like it, we always post clips on LinkedIn. Find one of those clips, share it onto your feed. Get some people interested in our show. Tell them what you got out of it and why they should watch. And hey, as always, if you do want to talk to us, if you have any thoughts, questions, if you've got topic ideas for future episodes you'd like us to tackle, reach out to us on Twitter at TEConnectPod. You can also email us TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. All right, well, we're going to wrap up with our usual recurring segments. We'll start off with the value to the VAR. This is where we kind of take our conversation as a whole, wrap it up, put a little bow on it, and tell our VAR audience maybe a takeaway they can take from this episode. I think there's a lot of good takeaways we've already had about approaching these conversations. Yeah. But, I also wanted to kind of go back to what a little bit of, what our channel is, most known for and spends a lot of time with, which is actual hardware devices.
Right.
And obviously, Code, you've got plenty, as well. So, Brian, I want to start with you. How does this digital transformation make it easier to sell purpose-built enterprise devices? I know there's, again, we talk about a lot of this stuff, and it's a broad, big topic where some of it is impacting our daily lives and just the technology we use every day. But, our resellers, sometimes their job is to move some barcode scanners, some mobile computers. They're trying to get some of this purpose-built technology out into the world. How does embracing digital transformation help them do that?
It's kind of like I mentioned earlier. It's what's happened is a game changer, and things are different. That opens up opportunities for us to sell things maybe in a little different way. So there's a lot of contactless type of things that have already happened or are going to continue to happen. So putting together packages or solutions that help with that story and removing contact points for customers that typically have to touch things like credit card machines and stuff like that. Maybe signing people in through scanning their driver's license and getting the data off of that instead of asking them to touch a keypad. There's so many different ways that we can put solutions together to help with that contactless theme that's happened.
Yep, that's a good one. I mean, so how does digital transformation make it easier to sell purpose-built? We're in the world, right? We're there. We're in it. So you just have to understand where the pieces are moving. We talked about operational efficiencies. We talked about customer experience, things like that nature. But to hammer it on it one more time, you got to have good relationships as well. Code has that, by the way. They have something called the Code Alliance Partners, where you're not out on an island. If you need a little bit of help, because you gotta, all right, the issues when you have the conversation with the customers, the issues, but now you need some support network to go back to and noodle on it. Draw it up on the whiteboard. Oh, here's the issues. They can help. Folks like Code can help with that. And you need people in your ecosystem to be able to do that, bounce ideas, come up with solutions, and take those to market. That's the way that you get it done. Understanding that there are opportunities out there right now. Digital transformation is happening now. Get out there, get on the front lines of it, and be an enabler to your customers.
Right.
That's the way to get done.
Yep. Well, I think the other thing to remember too is that our vendor partners like Code, for instance, they're building their devices with this kind of stuff in mind.
Yes.
They understand, hey, these kind of innovations are coming. We are already working on them. We're already talking about them. We have people like Brian who are experts in them and understand how they work, and that's why we're doing this kind of stuff. So we're building these devices with that stuff in mind, knowing that it is going to work with these, whatever it is that you're implementing in your business, whatever kind of new cool technology or new innovation that you're trying out. We have transformed our devices in order to match that. And it could mean something as simple as, hey, do you want to use a smartphone to scan everything where, it could easily be busted and broken, or you can't guarantee that the camera is going to be as high quality as it should, or it can scan every type of, code that's out there on the market? Or do you want to use a purpose-built scanner that is designed to handle any kind of barcode in existence, that can hold up to drops and wear and tear, that's disinfectant ready, or whatever it is that you need it to be? I think there's an important story to tell there of like, hey, yes, some of these new technologies could easily be implemented and used on your basic personal equipment and consumer equipment, but there's a reason why this stuff is purpose built for this industry, and also will work with that new technology as well.
Absolutely. Yep. Hey, you're preaching to the choir. No, I'm just kidding.
True, I am. I'm assuming our VARs know that, but it's an important conversation to have, because I know that there are times when they go out there and someone says, well, we like this, but we've got our phones. We can just do it on our phones. Or we've got these old barcode scanners that we've been using for a couple decades. They'll work just fine, right? It's your job to get in there and say, no, let me explain why you need to be moving to some.
What you're reminding me of is sometimes digital transformation, they're missing the mark. Oh yeah, we moved part of our business, but they moved it in a direction that is not the best. It's not a long-term fix. It's a Band-Aid when you're using whatever, a phone as a barcode scanner. You need purpose-built. Our resellers know that. Yes. And so that's the opportunity that is out there, folks. I mean, there are people making silly decisions like that where they're not using purpose-built, and they're not connecting it to an ecosystem. They're just, anyway, it's the Wild West. I think Brian said it earlier on. There's a lot of Wild West out there that our customers, our end users are facing, and you got to lead them. You got to guide them along the way.
Exactly. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. And sometimes digital transformation is not necessarily what you might think of. How many times have you gone into a retailer over this past year and seen saran wrap wrapped around something that can't stand up to the disinfectant they're using? There's a lot of hardware that needs to be replaced because our cleaning habits have changed, and there's a lot of hardware out there that can't stand up to that. So if you're not buying the hardware with special plastics meant for that, then that's a problem.
Yeah. That's a very good point. If you have to accessorize and do improvisation and, putting rabbit ears on something or whatever to get it to do what you needed to do.
It's not a long-term fix.
Yeah, you're probably barking up the wrong tree.
Now, if you're a reseller, though, that's an opportunity.
That's true. Yeah.
You got to go in there and correct that.
Yeah, I would think if I was a reseller and I walked into a grocery store and saw stuff wrapped in saran wrap and just a piece of plastic that was torn off of a toy box or something, shielding something, I might be like, yeah, hey, we can do this a little bit better for you. So,
I was giving people leniency when the pandemic first hit.
Right,
okay,
right.
we
But
were
now,
all scrambling here, but now a year into it, dude, you got to have like a robust solution.
exactly.
No doubt about it.
All right. Well, hey, let's wrap up with our favorite segment of every week. What's Tech Connecting with you? This is where we get to talk about a cool piece of technology, innovation, science, an app, whatever that has caught our attention in the world of technology. Brian, I'll let you start. What's Tech Connecting with you right now?
It was actually hard for me to pick one because I'm one of those people that's constantly scouring for new tech. But the one that really popped into my mind was Microsoft Flight Simulator. I don't know if you guys have looked at this, but as a kid, I spent thousands of hours on flight simulators because my dad was a fighter pilot in the Air Force, and I thought that's what I was going to end up doing. And just recently, Microsoft came out with a brand new flight simulator, and what they did is they took their version of Google Earth, which is powered by Bing. And so they have all of the photography and the GPS data and all the mapping data for the entire globe. And that's now the game. So you can literally fly anywhere in the entire world that you would like to. But not only did they do that, but they took AI and they have the AI analyze the photography and the satellite imagery real time as you're flying to build that into a 3D environment and make the trees look realistic, make the mountains look realistic, make the buildings look realistic. It is one of the most mind-blowing things I've seen in technology in a long, long time, and it just makes me so excited for where we're going.
How much
That
is
is
this,
awesome.
Brian? Can we afford this at this point in time, or is it?
Yeah, the game is not that expensive. It's your typical $69 game or whatever it
okay.
is.
All right.
But the machine that you need to run it on, that can be the expensive part. I actually built a custom gaming machine to run this thing because my Macintosh was not going to do it.
Ah,
Wow.
gotcha.
Yeah, I heard somebody recently found a way to plug the whole Ever Given Suez Canal ship blockage solution into
Oh, how?
the flight simulator. I guess they added that in as something that you could go buzz around and check that out or something.
I gotcha.
Too. So
I gotcha. I'm liking that one, Brian.
That sounds
I've been
cool.
digging flight simulation on my little iPad, and there's games that you can do. You can beat a fighter pilot, right, and fly around these worlds. But that would be really cool.
And I remember playing
cool.
Pilot Wings back on the old Super Nintendo, and I thought that was pretty harrowing. But
Is it VR? Do you can you use the goggles too, or is it just on the TV right now, on the screen?
I think they just launched VR a couple months ago. I don't have a VR headset, so I haven't done it, but I've seen a couple videos, and I would love to try it.
Right?
Very
Yes, that would be
awesome.
the
Yeah.
full experience.
Yeah,
So we're getting closer to it.
yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
All right, what's Tech Connecting with you, Dean?
Well, so Google's unhackable security keys were hacked.
Yeah. Like, wait for it. Yeah.
Wait for it. So when are we going to get? Are we ever going to get in a world that there is such a thing as like something that can't be hacked? I'm feeling like that just doesn't exist.
I guess
now.
blockchain technically is as close as we get right now. Like people feel
okay.
pretty confident about that. But
Yeah. All right. But I'm talking like personal security,
Right.
like your stuff. So anyway, they have this thing that's called the Titan security key. And it's like it's the old school fob, right? You've got the USB on your computer and the fob, and it's supposed to be, you can't break it. I mean, it's just when you log on, it is you because you've logged on using the Titan security key.
right.
Well, it's been cloned. So maybe it's not you, maybe it's somebody else. So it's just like, I mean, if Google can't figure it out they got more money than God, right? And they came up with a solution that I guess it wasn't hacked, but it's clonable. Somebody, a research lab came out called Ninja Labs and said, yep, we cloned that. So now there could be 2 of Dean's fobs out there in the world. It's like, you have this hope that maybe someday we'll get to this uncrackable something out there that finally security's good to go.
I feel like anytime you introduce some new piece of security, you say it's unhackable. There's like several thousand hackers in the world that go, challenge accepted.
Big old bullseye right on that
just
bad
get
boy.
right to work on it. Yeah.
Well, that's what Ninja Labs did. It's like, I don't know how many resources they put, 2.5 years that they spent on trying to hack
Maybe
it.
you just
But
need to say like it's almost unhackable. If someone who's really good works really hard, they will probably be able to do it, but most people will not. You're probably pretty safe.
Anyway,
That's not as good of a marketing pitch, though, is it?
so I'm back to
You're probably pretty safe.
Don't worry about it. So we just assume that we're all going to be hacked, and
Right.
it's just a waiting game at this point in time.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
my whole life, is spilled out over the internet, and my credit goes to crap. And
I mean,
anyway,
let's be honest. The goal is just be boring enough and not have enough of anything that's of interest or use.
there you go. Just kind of float along.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people can get your money, but otherwise, nothing else about you is useful enough to, to hack. Then maybe they'll leave you alone. So that's my goal, at
All
least.
right, so pick us up a little bit. What's tech connecting with you?
So I'm just going to shout out the Apple ecosystem.
Okay.
People who watched the video version of the show may have recognized that I actually moved to a MacBook a few weeks ago.
You came to the dark side.
Yes, I finally forsook my PC and moved to the dark side of the app. I'm not even going to call it the dark side. It's actually the bright side.
The
I think
bright
I was
side,
on
yes.
the dark side.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, so there's a little history here for me though, because growing up, Brian, you mentioned at the top of the pod, I think this idea, like, you went to high school and there was no such thing as really the internet. We were all kind of, in the Stone Age a little bit still. I remember, learning to type on a, electronic typewriter and thinking that was fantastic. Word processor, and thinking like, amazing.
Erase.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Computers were just starting to show up in school around the time I graduated, but I had a lot of buddies that were big into computers and big into tech, and they always hated anything to do with Apple. They were always big PC people. They're like, Macs are awful. Don't mess with anything Apple. It's terrible.
Right.
So when they were helping me early on before I knew much about technology and putting together computers, and it was always PC, PC, PC. Stay away from the Macs.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right. So I did for the very longest time. Even when it came time to get a smartphone, I started with an Android, eventually got an iPhone. I had an iPad that I didn't even do anything with for the first year or so I had it, and eventually became immersed in the Apple ecosphere. And now, of course, I've got a Mac, and I'm like, man, like, this is just so cool. I just love the fact that like all of it just works so well together.
It just
all
works.
talks to each other.
It does.
Simple stuff like, like handoff. I love being able to like start something on my phone and just move it right over to my computer. I love the one thing I just discovered a couple weeks ago that I thought was fascinating was copy paste. I can copy something on my iPad and just go right to my Mac and hit paste, and it knows that I'm pasting it from my iPad.
That's cool.
You
I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that.
It's awesome.
Yes.
Like stuff like that is so cool. And honestly, even too, like for some reason, the speakers on a Mac just sound good.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
yeah.
I know you're not like talking like studio quality type of sound, or whatever, but compared to what you listen to on like on a standard PC speakers, if you don't hook anything up, like when I play some random music on here, I'm like, man, this actually sounds pretty good, So
They do have a good product.
So thanks, Apple. You officially own me now.
There you go. Yeah,
I have officially, sold my soul to Apple. I've hit that, user agreement enough times that I'm sure I've signed off on something, and there's a digital version of me somewhere in the Apple, ecosphere.
Wait a minute. Maybe that's something that hasn't been hacked yet, right? The OS hasn't been hacked yet. I mean, Apple hangs their hat on that. So
yeah, they just
maybe there is still
pretty
hope out
secure.
there. Yeah. Well, I'm staying in the Apple world myself, I guess, unless I go over to the gaming system that Brian has, where I get my flight simulation. I got to go PC with that, right, Brian? So
yeah, they're working on fixing that. Maybe with the new M1 generation chipset and bringing all the iOS games over to the Mac platform, maybe that'll fix it for them.
There you go. There you go.
Awesome. Well, Brian, again, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, sir.
Very much appreciate your time. And as always, it is unfortunately time for us to unplug. So, hey, folks, until next time, please stay connected. Your healthcare customers might think any barcode scanning software will do the trick on their mobile devices, but Code and you know better. That's why they created Cortex Decoder, the first integrated soft scanning solution for Epic Rover. Epic was one of the first HIS providers to recognize the need for powerful decoding software built within their applications and designed for mobile devices, combining the familiarity and ease of personal smartphones with enterprise-grade functionality and reliability. Cortex Decoder reads all major barcodes, even ones that are damaged, curved, and from other phones. It offers flexible configuration and uses a mobile device's built-in camera, but unlike freemium apps, has no hidden fees, ads, or security risks. To learn more, contact your BlueStar code rep or visit the link in the show notes.